easiest.
Everyone's fine with the handout? Okay.
Great.
All right, we are good with the handout, so give me 1 second. I just need to get us, I need to just get us called to order first.
Of course, no worries.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, you guys, I'm going to call our Tuesday, November 2nd Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The first item on, I have to take the roll. Is that right? It's a call to order roll call. Okay, all right. The first item and only item is a presentation regarding the investment of our city funds. You all have the presentation sitting on your desks. And then I see Tammy and Dawn are here from Ellers. So with that, I will turn it over to you guys. Just as a housekeeping item, we will start the council meeting at 7 o'clock. So if you have questions, Mr. Bash, just keep that in mind. All right.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for allowing us the time to present your portfolio review. We like to try to do this at least once a year, and with the COVID restrictions and some of what is going on in the world, we have not been to visit. So this is a good opportunity for us to just provide you an overview, even if it is unfortunately via an electronic meeting component. So without further ado, my name is Tammy Oshevsky, and I will not ask you to repeat that. I always just say Tammy O is fine. I'm a senior investment advisor here with Ellers, and Dawn Lawson, my counterpart, is also on the call. She's really the boss of me. She keeps us all in line and makes sure that you have everything you need within your account, whether it be access or transactions. So Dawn is our client services advisor, and if you have questions as we go along, don't be afraid to just raise your hand and let us know. But I will cover the first few pages. The first page is a summary, and the nice part about the page is it just gives you a full overview of what's been going on. When I set this up, I like to go through an entire 1 year period. So this is from September of 2020 through September of 2021. And then we'll talk a little bit about the next couple of pages, which is just a cash flow, which is helpful. You've probably been going through a lot of budget conversations and calls right now, and that will show you what you can expect from an income standpoint coming up. It's also useful to you if you have projects going on. So I'm sure as things are going on in the city, you may have questions about what funds you have available or what you can use, and this will highlight that for you. So Dawn, did you have anything else you wanted to add before I go ahead and get started?
Nope, I've got it.
Great, thank you. So thank you again. Just to get started, I'll go through the first section, which is off to the left. You'll see the investment summary and transactions. This really details for you the beginning balance, any transactions. So when we say change in net, if the transaction net or net contribution, that really is speaking to any funds that have been sent in or taken out. So at any given time throughout the year, there may be a reason that you need funds available for cash flow purposes, and we can happily send those over to you, to your bank. And on the flip side, if you run into idle funds, we generally recommend that you don't keep much more than 4 months worth of operational cash really just sitting idle. You can always send that back into your accounts, and we can invest those based upon your strategy. Just to give you an idea of how we operate, we work with your team and really is an extension of your group. So all decisions made really are a team effort. I provide some of that guidance and expertise, but of course, your finance team ultimately makes the decisions that are on behalf of your constituents and ultimately on behalf of the governing body. So all of the transactions that you see within your portfolio are based upon, your finance policies, your investment policies, state statutes. So we keep you compliant with all restrictions, and we want to make sure you always have cash flow that you need. So the actual beginning market value and the ending market value won't always change dramatically. The goal would be to have that predictable income on the portfolio. So just to look at the summary, there's always a gain loss. The net realized gain loss is really due to any purchases that we make in the account. Say if we have a premium purchase, which is not uncommon with municipal bonds, or sometimes you'll see that on CDs, you pay a little bit more for it than say face value in hopes of earning income that will offset that. Now the actual interest dividend received, you'll see is about $187,000 for the year. And of course that's the 12-month period, September of 2020 through September of 2021. Your finance team does keep track of all of that information for you, and from an accounting standpoint, month by month, they are tracking any income, and of course, they will offset that at the end of the year for any premiums that were paid or discounts that were received. Now, there is also an expense associated with our services. So some of you may have seen this in the past. Our services were about $19,112 for the full year. So we like to say that we're a pretty inexpensive way to add some staff. We try to make sure that we're earning you some value in the income that we're projecting and the income that you receive. But of course, we also help to consolidate some of your investment reporting, and we give you that guidance to ensure that you're making informed decisions. Now, the actual performance summary, it's pretty simple when you're thinking about your municipal funds or public funds. It ultimately focuses heavily on income. So, as I mentioned before, your beginning market value and ending market value may not fluctuate dramatically year over year, and that's because the portfolio is designed for that income and that predictability. So you'll see on the income return for the prior 12 months, let me actually pull this up because it's cut off on the page, but your actual year to date is about 0.51, which doesn't sound super exciting, but in today's market conditions, it's actually not that far off from what we're seeing. And then, of course, if you take a look at the book yield, now book yield is going to factor in under the cash and investment income summary. That factors in all premiums, discounts, really the costs that you have associated with each security, and then any income that is expected or anticipated on that security. So your book yield is about 0.735. So again, not super exciting in the world of investments, but it's actually a very solid and reliable rate from an income standpoint for your municipal portfolio right now. We do seek to maintain those credit ratings within state statutes, so the averages can get skewed a little bit with CD holdings. CDs are actually FDIC insured, so we don't always look at the underlying ratings of those banks. The actual CD itself is insured. And then, of course, we always like to highlight for you that we look to make sure that your portfolio is diversified. So that exposure component off to the left really highlights some of the work that you've done to make sure that you have a nice blend of investment types. You have CDs, municipal bonds, some money market holdings, which is some liquid funds, and then, of course, you have some agency bonds. Agency bonds are similar to a municipal bond, however, it's government agencies. So you have a nice blend there that does help in the event that the city were to need to liquidate any assets ahead of maturity. It's good to have options so that we can guide you through what might be the most advantageous or lead to the least potential loss to the city if you had to sell early. Thankfully, you haven't had to do that, but that's certainly one of the factors we're looking at when we keep you compliant. We want to make sure that you have that operational cash flow as needed, and if in the event that you needed to sell something early, we want to make sure you have a nice blend of securities to choose from. And then off to the right, we also like to highlight that your time to maturity is actually, we do recommend that you keep things out, 3 to 5 years on an average, but of course the weighted average life of the portfolio right now is a little short. We've shortened up a lot of our maturities in the last couple of years just due to the uncertainties in the market and the low risk or the low rate environment. So the weighted average life right now is about 1.8, but you do see some of those spikes up and down, and that really just represents the periodic maturities, which we'll talk about on the cash flow component. So just to summarize, we really focus heavily on that predictable income, and we want to make sure that your portfolio is compliant with state statutes and your investment policy. But ultimately, the next component that we'll talk about is probably the most important. It really focuses heavily on that operational cash flow, making sure you have funds when you need them, and of course, the income that is projected over the next year. But before I move on, does anybody have any questions? I covered a lot of information there.
Mr. Pash. We have one.
Who determines our?
Sure.
Use your mic, Mr. Pash.
Oh, sorry. Who determines our asset class allocation? Like, do we give them discretion to do that, or do we have someone on our end that handles that?
Let me see here if I can try this.
Otherwise, I can repeat.
No,
Okay.
I can't hear, but if you wouldn't mind repeating.
The question that he asked was who determines our asset class splits? Was that
That's a
correct?
good question. Yeah, it's very valuable. And a lot of it is our guidance, and we try to make sure that you have some balance. We typically like to stay within that 30 to 40% range on any one particular security type, but we can at times also sway a little bit further on either side if there's an advantageous or opportunistic moment in the market. Your investment policy also can drive that. We have some clients that are far more restrictive or specific in those policies, but that's also not always necessary with municipal funds. You know, municipal funds are really driven by state statute, and state statute puts, because it's public money, state statutes really drive the available securities for you. So ultimately, it comes down to making sure that all of us are on the same page with the best opportunities and, what's best for the community. So that's a good question. But yeah, ultimately, a lot of it is our recommendation and experience in the markets as well as your investment policy.
Any follow-up? Yep.
Just a quick follow-up. So how would we compare this to our peer group in terms of performance over the past year?
The question,
And that's another good question. It was that compared to your peer group from a performance standpoint?
yes.
Yeah.
So every municipality defines that a little bit differently. I would say the majority of our clients are typically looking at like an LGIP is I don't want to say benchmark, but really the baseline. So that local government investment pool is a Wisconsin pool that actually is very, very liquid. It's a cash product for you that it has a variable rate. So it's not a fixed income product, but a lot of our clients leverage that as a sort of a baseline. If you had to do it on your own, how bad could it get? And to give you an example right now, the LGIP is at about 0.05%. So even less exciting than, the standard treasury or investment rates that we're seeing right now. Some of our clients use what's called a blend or a benchmark blend called a Bank of America. It's a municipal income portfolio that is based upon set parameters. It really is dependent upon each municipal client, what you prefer or what you would like to use. Your actual benchmark right now, and Dawn, correct me if I'm looking at this wrong. My computer's running slow, but I thought it would pop up on here. It's probably the 1 to 3 year is typically what we use. And keep in mind that when we talk about your portfolio, we are talking about an aggregate of all of your accounts, but you do have a variety of account types with us as well, and each of those ultimately may also be defined individually. So let me take a peek here.
It's the 1 to 3 year Treasury Index.
It is. Okay, perfect. So that really focuses, it puts you in alignment with what we're seeing in a very low risk portfolio like a treasury market. That 1 to 3 years is comparable with what we would typically see in like a municipal general fund portfolio. But that's really how we define, whether we're meeting your standards or not.
Yeah, and I think I sense it's a low risk, and I appreciate that, but,
Yeah.
maybe there's a little bit left on the table, but we have a responsibility, I get it.
And there are opportunities within the portfolio that I would recommend. We have been extremely conservative in the portfolio as of recent. I would say lengthening some of the maturities and taking advantage of some of the investment opportunities that are coming up would help, but it also, ultimately, we always focus on that safety of principal first and foremost.
I agree with
But
you.
no, that's a good point.
I agree.
And I know some of the accounts have been shorter in nature. We've had periods of time where they've been sitting in cash for a period of time as you determine the possibility of using some of those funds and liquidating them.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we're ready. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Mr.
I do have a question. You'd mentioned most of this is driven by state statute, and that makes a lot of sense given the fact of our municipality. How much room in the portfolio do we have so that our investments could at least keep pace with somewhat inflation? Because looking at a net unrealized gain of less than 1%, we're not even keeping track with a quarter of inflation right now. So if there's room on the table for us to be a little bit more aggressive, to at least somewhat keep pace with inflation, we need to start looking at that as a viable option because otherwise we're losing money faster than we're taking it in, and that doesn't help anyone.
No, that's actually a really good point and a really hot topic in today's market. So, I tend to argue that we do want to establish a longer term maturity. Oftentimes they talk about inflation as an erosion of your dollar. So a dollar today isn't going to be the same as a dollar tomorrow or 10 years from now. That being said, we ultimately, because our portfolios are so restricted and driven by state statute, we always focus on that safety of principle. And even within those parameters, I have investment options available to municipalities that you take a little bit of risk, certainly, but it's a very cautious risk in the sense that most of what we have available, even on the quote unquote riskier end of the municipal securities or fixed income options, are oftentimes providing some level of insurance or assurance or guarantee. So yes, there are options available to you, but as Dawn highlighted, municipal portfolios also face the necessity of having that periodic liquidity for cash flow purposes. So as the city was working through some projects over the last couple of years, there were definitely periods of time where I don't want to say we had to sit on the sidelines as much as we needed to be mindful that you had cash available in case you needed it. So you have a couple of things working against you, and I wouldn't stress too much on the idea of inflation as much as I would always focus on that safety of principle first. And, certainly we can always discuss, and I'm happy to present, options that may pose a greater opportunity to you, but I don't know that I'd stress over it too much at this point. The portfolio itself actually is in a good position for project planning. But again, a lot of this is thinking further ahead. And you guys have done a really good job, I would say, in the last couple of years of starting to plan ahead further. And that is going to help you in the long run.
Just to give you an idea of where rates are at today, the 10-year treasury is at 1.56. So you'd have to go out, significantly more than 10 years in the treasury market. And I'm just right now looking at a AA rated Apple corporate security. And the highest we can get is about about 1.8. And there's only even 100,000 of that. And that's a 10-year bond at 1.8%. So it's really hard to get over the 2% inflation rate.
But again, and I think it's good that you bring that up, Dawn, because at the end of the day, the longer out you can plan on that maturity ladder, the more advantageous it will be in the long run. So a lot of the portfolios that we work with that have a little bit further, duration and are able to plan further ahead, they're not seeing as much of a downturn in the income and the yield at this point. But again, I wouldn't consider that, it's certainly not a dig on anybody or any decisions that have been made. I really think that you guys have done a good job of setting yourself up for success moving forward, and you're really doing a good job of planning further ahead. That will help significantly as we strategize over the next couple of years here, and hopefully interest rates will start to turn around a bit. But they really do fluctuate, and I've seen a few cycles in even my tenure in investments. So nothing really sets me in alarm unless somebody wants to invest in something really, really risky. But that's another reason I'm here, to make sure we keep you compliant.
Mr. Pash.
All right, I agree. I think the 10-year yield curve is flat, so I'm not thinking 10-year. Are you able to model out maybe kind of the low risk, mid, and maybe slightly elevated? I mean, can you provide some models of 3 different tiers and give us some context to that? No, obviously not tonight, but going into the year ahead, I'm curious what that looks like in terms of your approach.
Yeah, that's a good question. And if I understood correctly, you're curious, if there are models or examples that I could say, hey, if you were in this model, it would be about this much. Is that what you meant?
It's all hypothetical, but just giving some context of what maybe we would have achieved at a middle or higher, slightly elevated.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that I could show you, it's tough because in the investment world, I can say, hey, if we had done this over the last year, this is what you could have seen. And nobody wants to think about what they could have, should have, but I could show you a couple of example portfolios where like the structure maybe is a little bit longer term and what that has done over the same time period. From a regulatory standpoint, we are pretty restricted. We can't necessarily compare you to another portfolio because your objectives might be a little different. And Dawn, you can chime in here if you are thinking of anything else that I might not be thinking about, but they're unlike with retirement assets. So when you work with an investment advisor on, say, your personal retirement assets, a lot of times they say, okay, you're going to retire in 2020 or 2040 or 2060, and they put you in a model, and then you and all 100 people in that model have the exact same portfolio within the same parameters. So it's pretty easy to measure you against the other 100 people, but with municipal investments and fixed income type of portfolios, especially with how different each objective might be client to client, it's pretty difficult. We don't model people, we don't bucket anybody. So you're not in like a model with our portfolio. We really customize all of our strategies for each client.
Thank you.
And I mean, I'm certainly happy to help, and we can talk a little bit more offline about this at some point too. Maybe in the future we have another, sort of refresh or rehash on some of the investment strategies that we typically recommend. And some of it goes back to, when I say take a little bit more risk, it's not so much that I'm saying to invest in Bitcoin as much as I'm saying, hey, let's really focus on a longer term strategy and build that predictability. So, it might not be for tonight's meeting, but certainly I'm happy to come and we could do even a workshop and walk through what those types of portfolios will look like.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and you're not that far from us, so we're just down the road.
I think we can jot that down for the finance director. I mean, a lot of this, having those two
Yeah.
positions be separate will be beneficial for us. We'll have someone that will have the time to have a little bit more forecasting. We've talked about this for the last few years, and we just don't have the bandwidth with one body to be giving it the attention that our team at Ellers
Yeah.
needs for it to have. So, okay, in the interest of time, you can always
Yep.
keep asking more questions, but I will move us at least to the next pages. And
Yeah, and really, just for benefit of the whole group, the next few pages are what we call an investment cash flow. And ultimately, this is what we leverage when we're thinking about your future maturities that are coming up. So as once you get everyone staffed up and back in place and you have your new hires ready to go, we'll meet with them and go through, here's what's projected year over year, and we can get into as much detail as month over month. So a lot of this is customizable for you, but I wanted to make sure that you all saw exactly what is coming down the pipeline. So for 2021 yet, you still have about 31,000 in income that we'll post before year end. And then for 2022, we are projecting, and I should also note, this assumes you don't reinvest anything else that's maturing. So this is really the worst case scenario from an income standpoint. You're expected to be about 133,000 for 2022. Certainly as we build out the investment strategy and continue to reinvest, that number will increase. But I like to make sure that everybody knows from a budget standpoint, it's a really easy number to say, hey, based upon our current status is what we can expect. And then you do have in 2021 a couple maturities still. So here in November and then a couple in December. And you can see then in 2022, there are periodic maturities in each of the different account funds. So you can plan ahead for those in case you need them as well. So I wanted to include this so that you all can see, from a capability standpoint, we really partner with you so that we can provide these projections. And especially as you get a new person in your finance team, it will be helpful to be able to guide them through, especially from a cash flow standpoint. We'll set up some time and really develop a forecast so that, there's some project planning that goes into it and, ultimately setting up a full financial picture.
additional questions? You can ask more if you need to.
I'm good.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask. And if you think of something after we get off the call, just let us know. I'm happy to provide any information that you might need.
Anybody else on this one? Do you have anything?
I have.
You're gonna have to talk into your mic for sure.
Oh, sorry. I have mentioned to Dawn and Tammy that there are probably some opportunities with the three utilities, stormwater, water, and wastewater, to take some funds from, that are being held at LGIP. Like she said, it's safe, it's liquid, but the interest rate is dismal. And there's probably some opportunities there. We had kind of started talking about that, but I've decided to hold off on moving any of those funds until the future finance director is here and can make those decisions. And I think it's best that we meet with Jane Ellen and Pete and, find out what the big projects are down the road, because I don't want to, say to Tammy and Dawn, okay, I'll send you a couple million, invest this for
Right.
5 years, give you some options for 3, 4, 5 years, not knowing exactly what their needs are for the next few years. So I'd like that to be a decision that the future finance director makes.
Any?
I don't know if I caught any of that.
I couldn't catch any of it.
Elissa was just sharing that she'd shared with you all that we have some money at LGIP that with
Yep.
our utilities that we can probably invest once we have a new finance director and better ideas of what their long-term projects are. I think we have a fairly good idea of what that 5-year capital plan looks like for them, so we'll be looking for that down the road, probably early in 2022.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's perfect. And really, as I mentioned before, once you get somebody in that role, it'll be a nice opportunity for us to, and we'll make the drive out and, go visit, is it Mullins Dairy Bar, right?
Yeah.
And Dawn and I'll have lunch and we'll enjoy some cash flow discussion and talk shop about investments. But it like I said, you guys have done a really nice job of setting yourself up so we can really get everything set up from a cash flow standpoint and make sure that your strategy is in alignment so that you have the project funds you need. But, there is some opportunity to earn additional income for sure.
Okay. Mr. Pash will invite you to that lunch.
Please do.
Yeah.
I'll be all ears, I promise.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything before we let our Ellers team go? All right. Thank you, Tammy. Thanks, Dawn.
Yeah.
It's nice to
Thanks,
meet you face to
guys.
face. I had a real moment during the budget when I called these two. I was Googling numbers on the
Thank you.
internet. So, hi, it's me. I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
thank you.
No, thank you so much. And it was really lovely to see everyone. I hope you all have a lovely end of year and happy holiday season. And we'll see you early next year.
Sounds good. Thank you. With that, I would look for a motion to adjourn our committee of the whole.
So moved.
Motion by Ritten, and a second by Licht. Any other, no. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, you guys, we have 2 minutes. 2 minutes, thank you. Hey, Carol and